with propellant. You can see there people wearing specific suits because of the dangerousness of the activity. In parallel, BSAT-4B was also filled with propellant in another building called S4. After filling, the next operation is what we call flight mating. It means that we attach the spacecraft onto its adapter. After flight mating, we can transfer the spacecraft from the payload processing facility to the building where it will meet the launcher upper part structures. For that, we use the dedicated container. MEV2 was hoisted on top of the Silda mid-July. As you know, the particularity of the mission is that we have two upper passengers. So Galaxy 30 followed the same path as MEV2 before being integrated on top of MEV2 the same day. The upper stack being prepared, we then encapsulated the upper stack with the ferry. In parallel, BSAT-4B was also prepared for flight. It started with the flight mating of BSAT-4B onto its adapter, and then we have to transfer BSAT-4B onto the BAF building where it will meet the launcher. You can see there the hoisting operation of BSAT-4B onto the launcher. On that picture, you can also see the new vehicle equipment bay, which is a new item which will fly for this mission, and BSAT-4B was mated on that. Once both parts were prepared, we can make the integration of the composite onto the launcher. Now the upper part is complete.
Well, thanks for talking us through that. Now, as we well know, there are lots of things we can control on a rocket launch, and they're a very, very controlled environment. But there's one thing we can't control, and that's Mother Nature. So we have a couple of weather checks, one at 20 minutes to launch and one at 10 minutes to launch. Let's go over now to Bruno Gérard, who we saw earlier in the Mission Control Center next to Luce. And Bruno, can you hear me? Great. Bruno can hear me, I think. Bruno.
So, hello, Cathy. I hear you.
Great. We've had the latest 20-minute weather check, haven't we, Bruno? What's the situation?
So situation is not bad. We got the information, so we have some clouds above us, but it seems okay on the lightning's problem. Winds are correct, so for the moment, up to now, we seem to have a green. This green will be confirmed at minus 10 minutes.
And Bruno, what's the weather like at the moment in French Guiana? I believe we're coming out of the raining season, is that right?
Yes, absolutely, Cathy. We just are going outside of the rainy season and we are entering the dry season. So the weather is quite changing, evolving, but up to now, it seems very good for this evening.
Bruno, what kind of conditions could actually delay a launch?
In fact, we have many factors. First one, of course, the winds, low altitude winds, high altitude winds, but also we have, like any airplane, the conditions about lightnings. We don't like to enter big storms, so we check all the weather above the launch pad, but remember that in 2 minutes we are outside of the atmosphere.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed, Bruno. We'll await the weather check at 10 minutes too, but for the moment, best wishes for the rest of the countdown. Thank you, Bruno. So we are flying on board Ariane5, as we've said, the big, powerful beast of a launcher, the heavy lifter of the Ariane family. We have 3 launches that we launch here. She's going to take off in just under She's going to take just under an hour to deliver our satellites. And so let's just have a look now at what's going to happen once she lifts off and how she's going to do that.
The booster ignition will trigger the liftoff of the launch vehicle. Shortly after the liftoff, the launcher will perform a pitch maneuver in order to get in the right direction. The boosters
¿Qué tal? Están explicando el tema de cómo es el lanzamiento, que tienen 2 boosters. Buenas tardes a todos. Estamos a 15 minutos del lanzamiento. Luego de los 2 boosters que cambian de una etapa a otra.
the main stage is separated and will fall down into the Atlantic Ocean. The upper stage is ignited,
una vez que se separen y encienda la etapa siguiente, el motor principal va a caer en el océano, o sea, se descarta. No hay retorno de esa etapa.
This is the aerothermal flux. Upper stage switches off when we have reached the orbit. This is the beginning of the ballistic phase when we can separate all the spacecraft. First of all, Galaxy 30, then MEV2 separation.
Una vez que esté en balística, dice que bueno, separa el primer satélite y luego el segundo.
We separate the SILDA. And finally, BSAT-4B, our last passenger. The launch vehicle mission
son tres cargas de
is not
pago,
completed
están
yet
llegando.
because it will start the passivation. After that moment, the mission control center team will take over and the spacecraft team will make all the job to get the satellite up to their final journey.
Indeed, and of course,
bueno, dice que después de eso Control va a tomar la dirección de los satélites y los va a recolocar en la posición de órbita. Tienen su propia propulsión. La mayoría de los satélites tienen, inclusive para poder mantener la órbita. Eso, ¿no?
So it's actually going to dock with another satellite, and then it's going to push it a little bit, use its own thrusters, and raise its orbit.
Javier, ¿qué tal? Nos está preguntando desde Rosario. Saludos. Nos está preguntando Alexis si mañana salen 2 astronautas de la Estación Espacial. Sí, correcto. Vamos a estar transmitiendo. Va a ser una transmisión bastante larga. Pueden llevar de 6 a 30 horas desde que se desacoplan de la Estación Espacial hasta el splashdown, como le llaman, o sea, es el que aterrizan en el océano. ¿No? No van a saber exactamente porque tienen distintas ventanas de oportunidades y unos 3, 4, tienen 7 lugares, pero en realidad son próximos a 2 barcos que están para recogerlos cerca de la costa Florida. Es relativo, ¿no? Entre 50 y 180 kilómetros de la costa, ¿no?
The latest team is led by Guillaume Galato, the LSTO, whereas the operational team was led by the LCOM, Patrick Lucet, that we have seen at the beginning of the movie. And you can see there people working inside the CDL.
So that's the Launch Control Center there in French Guiana, but there is actually another one in France, in Europe, and it's called Space Code. It's an exact replica, so all the launch controllers in Europe can see exactly what the launch controllers can see in French Guiana. Let's find out a little bit more now about how it works and the reasons for it.
Tienen un sistema de control del lanzamiento duplicado, uno en Guyana y uno exactamente igual en Europa, y están conectados los dos. Es lo que nos están mostrando ahora. ¿Qué tal, Álvaro? Saludos, un abrazo grande allí a Tucumán.
Welcome to all of you in our Space Code room.
Escuchemos un poquito.
In Les Mureaux, close to Paris. This is one of the rooms which is in place for each of our Ariane5 launches, where we have operators
Eso es en París.
preparing the launch during the day of the countdown, as it is the case today.
Son los técnicos franceses o europeos que están allí en París siguiendo el lanzamiento en duplicado con el centro de control que está en la Guyana.
In Guyana, in the range of 50 to 60 people who are actually operating the ground system equipment that work with the launcher.
Entre 50 y 60 personas allí.
That feed the launcher with fuel, with propellant, and so on. And these are the people.
Lo que hace toda la gente de control allá, aparte del control, es la carga de combustible, el suministro de energía, en fin.
Supervising the status of the launcher.
Connie, ¿qué tal? Saludos a México. Buenísimo, gracias por sumarte. Recuerden, les agradezco si pueden compartir en sus redes sociales esto, así aumentamos un poco la comunidad. Los que no están suscriptos, el botón de suscribir y recibir notificaciones, así estar enterados de las próximas transmisiones. Lo próximo seguramente va a ser el regreso de los 2 astronautas de la Estación Espacial Internacional.
Displays. They have exactly the same setup of displays to monitor the launch. The difference between the 2 teams is that the people who are staying in Kourou for supervising the launcher from them, in fact, these people have more frequently a need to interact with the people operating the launcher, so the supervisors talking to the operators of the launcher. Here in Les Mureaux, the people who are here with us today are more looking at parameters of the launchers that will not require a direct intervention by the operators, but that may require a work together with a third team, which is a team of experts that are put at their disposal in another room in the CALM, and these experts will be called by the supervision team here in Les Mureaux, should there be, at any point in time in the chronology, should there be an anomaly, a singularity, something which has to be checked by technical specialists.
Supervisar todo el tema del lanzamiento y en caso de que necesiten intervención de alguien específico, lo están llamando, ¿no? Aquí nos están mostrando un poco más de las instalaciones.
We are in a room where all the launcher technical leader will be for the chronology. We are in charge here to prepare the chronology in the space code rooms, so meaning with the preparation of an organization note where we gather all the people, the key people who are involved in this chronology. So and during the chronology we have also to ensure that all people are well positioned, and we have to ensure that all the communication with crew are correct. In case of a specific technical event or anomaly, of course, in the position of LSTM here in Les Mureaux, we have to alert everybody so that we can then...
Es una sala de control duplicada. En caso de que haya alguna anomalía o algo, ellos pueden tomar el control desde allí y seguir ellos. Pero en realidad quien hace todo el control real es en el centro de lanzamiento en la Guyana Francesa.
The final countdown started about 11 hours ago. We're now 8 minutes and 37 seconds.
Ellos dicen que el real cuenta regresiva empezó 11 horas atrás. Evidentemente sí, esto no empezó hace 20 minutos. Inclusive la carga de combustible y la habilitación de todo eso, solo la carga de combustible lleva más de media hora, ¿no? ¿Qué tal, Grillo? Buenas noches allí en España. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo va eso?
And we are doing this in order to be able to check that everything is working perfectly before we enter the synchronized sequence.
And here we can see the teams in French Guiana, the program director's desk. What are these guys doing? And there's the
Ese es el
Jean-Christophe
director de
Delaunay, who
programación.
is the
Mission director.
mission director.
El director de misión, ¿no?
And we can see here the status panels, and this is the range operations manager.
Yes.
Range Operation Manager es esa persona que lo que hace es que coordina que en toda la trayectoria balística del cohete y balística específicamente, si se queda sin combustible y cae, no encuentre nada en el camino. O sea, eso es lo que hace las oficinas de lo que llaman el range. Es increíble que no nos están mostrando un contador. El contador que tenemos, que ven arriba allí en la pantalla, allí es nuestro. Tenemos bien el reloj. Comenzaron la secuencia 6 minutos. Bueno, ellos dijeron 6:48, o sea, tenemos una diferencia de 40 segundos.
Yes, the synchronized sequence is a sequence which is fully automatized, which performs the latest preparation
si tenemos esa secuencia,
of the launcher
vamos a sacar la nuestra.
And the launcher is taken progressively autonomous, independent from the ground.
We can see in the Mission Control Center those boards that you're looking at on the left-hand side, the green panels. We call those the status panels, and all the systems across the base are sending their status there.
Yes, we have a panel which is made of
ahora sí, 6 minutos 11 segundos.
These elements correspond to subsystems which send their status. So mainly we need the launcher.
Ojalá que todo salga bien, Grillo.
We need
Es
a
su comentario.
go also from the customers, which will send their status, and finally the launch base. Everything is like a traffic light. If it's green, it's a go. If it's red, we have to stop and investigate.
Exactly, or it's a little bit like the dashboard of a car, same thing. Now, we are now joined by...
Bueno, como hacemos siempre, en el último minuto del próximo lanzamiento, en T-1, vamos a quitar de pantalla el superchat y va a seguir habilitado igual, pueden escribir sin problemas, pero no lo vamos a mostrar en la pantalla para tener una visión un poquito más clara de esto.
That we can address with our next generation of launch vehicle, Ariane5 and VIVO in the context of a very fast-changing satellite market.
And it is changing extremely fast, isn't it? Because, of course, everybody's, well, certainly, I think probably in March I had never heard of Zoom, and now I use the word like Google. Let's Google something and we Zoom it in English. I don't know whether in French you do the same thing. So things are changing. We all want more internet.
Yeah, there is Zoom, there is WebEx, so there is a real big demand in this dramatic situation of connectivity for situations of remote working. And so we know, and it confirms that the satellite have a role to play in this communication, providing through large projects of constellations, internet signals in order to connect everybody anywhere.
And right now we've got some very important satellites up there inside the fairing, which are going to help us to do that and make those connections. What are the conditions like inside the fairing? I'm guessing that they're kind of like first class in an aeroplane, air conditioning and that sort of thing.
En este momento están hablando de cuáles son las condiciones de la carga, ¿no? Bueno, lo que hacen es monitorear la temperatura dentro de la carga de pago.
So right now they've got their seat belts on.
And everything is ready
waiting for liftoff.
Cross fingers.
Yeah.
Tenemos los cinturones de
and the
seguridad
cabin
puestos
crew are
esperando
doing
para
the
el
final checks. So we have a number of things to watch out for before we come up to the launch. We are right now 3 minutes and 22 seconds.
3
if we
minutos,
take
20
a look
segundos
at
al
our
lanzamiento.
launcher on the pad, if we
Podríamos
have an
ver
image of that, we can see the skies looking pretty reasonably clear. Earlier it was looking a little bit cloudy, but actually the clouds seem to be parting. It's 6 o'clock coming up to 6 o'clock it's coming up to 6:30 in the evening there in French Guiana. Just remind you that French Guiana is on the Amazon, in the Amazon rainforest.
Yes,
what kind
it
of
is close to
temperatures?
the equator, so we have a specific weather there.
And I'm guessing, Raphael, right now is the time when the mosquitoes come out over there.
Yeah, I have not spent so much time in French Guiana, but yeah, it's quite strong situations, weather conditions there. But we are very lucky in French Guiana.
2 minutos y medio.
Not experiencing, and it's very important for launches, tornadoes and this kind of weather conditions that could be very, very game changer for those kind of launch activities.
Getting closer now, coming up to 2 minutes to launch. Let's talk about some of the activities that we see before a launch. We will count to 7 once we see the ignition. And before we talk about that, look, we're seeing here the cryogenic arms. The cryogenic arms are feeding liquid hydrogen and oxygen into the vehicle. What kind of temperatures are we talking about? Very cold.
The temperatures are really cold because for the liquid hydrogen, the temperature is
Grillo pregunta si se recupera algo el cohete. No, esta gente descarga absolutamente todo.
C'est un rouge ensemble de lancement. Que tous les moyens restent prêts pour la reprise de la chronologie à jour en 7 minutes en cas de retour au vert.
Okay, so we've just heard from the range operations manager that we'll translate that, and Damien will translate that for us. But we have a red status panel, as you remember. Damien was just explaining to us that the traffic lights are red for stop, green for go. We have a red status panel. That means that we need to stop. Damien, just to talk us through what the range operations manager just said.
This red corresponds to a red coming from the launch base. However, everybody is still keeping ready in order to restart the activities when the issue will be solved. This situation is completely nominal because the aim of this kind of check is to check everything before we go for liftoff. So we are currently treating this anomaly. And we will come back when we will have more information about that.
So the chronology is continuing for the moment, the chronology, or what we call in English the countdown. And as you say, Damien, the system is absolutely made for this. So red status panel is a perfectly normal thing to happen because it's flagging up a glitch that we need to fix. And once we can get that sorted out, then hopefully we'll be able to launch. Now, we have the status panels. Let's just see whether we can have another closer look at our status panels so that we can have a look and see the red status panel that has turned red.
A ver si podemos ver
Yeah,
qué es
no,
lo que
maybe we can't see that right now, but I'm sure we will in just 1 second. So we have a launch window tonight, quite a comfortable launch window. For anyone who's unfamiliar with a launch window is the time during which we can launch. So our time was roughly 11:30 for launch tonight, Paris time, and Central European time 10:30. But we have, how long is our launch window, and what does that actually mean?
The launch window for today is slightly more than 40 minutes. It corresponds to the period during which we can launch without still fulfilling all the requirements, if it comes from the overall system requirements or requirements coming from the customer. Because based on the launch hour, there can be different constraints of illuminations, of energy on the solar panels for the spacecraft after separations. So we are putting all these constraints together in order to build what we call the launch window, which is the time during which we fulfill all the constraints for the customer from the launch base and from the launcher. And for today, it's more than 40 minutes. So we have still time in order to be ready for liftoff later on.
And what's everybody doing now? Because as you remember, we've got the several different control centres. We've got the Mission Control Centre, which we've been looking at, the nerve centre really, where Luce and Bruno are sitting and the other teams. We also saw the Launch Control Centre, where the teams are concerned primarily with the launch vehicle and the launch pad.
¿Qué tal, Lucas? Bueno, Lucas está preguntando, vamos a bajar un poquito el volumen, está preguntando a qué hora lanzan. Teóricamente el lanzamiento ya había ocurrido ahora, pero tuvieron una luz roja por tráfico. Entonces el lanzamiento está detenido en este momento en los últimos 7 minutos. Estamos esperando a ver si hablan de alguna novedad más, que nos dicen algo más. Si es un tema de tráfico, es relativamente rápido. De todas maneras, tienen una ventana de aproximadamente 2 horas o un poco más en este lanzamiento, o sea que pueden, de aquí en adelante pueden reanudar el conteo y lanzar siempre dentro de esa ventana.
Because we check, of course, all constraints, as I told you, and one of the constraints that we have to check is that we have no risk of collision with the ISS, which is a really important
Yes, so
criteria.
let's just talk about that in a little bit more detail. But maybe you could explain to us what the ISS actually is, the International Space Station.
Space Station is like one of the major projects that's been built in space, and it actually is a good example of cooperation in space, because there are lots of space agencies, national agencies that are implicated there. And of course, you know that our national hero, Thomas Pesquet, went there once, and he will go back there.
I'm just going to remind everybody that Thomas Pesquet is the French astronaut who lived.
Carlos nos está preguntando si SpaceX es la empresa con más avance delante de las demás. En este momento quizás no, porque todavía no tienen el cohete más poderoso, ¿no? Están en la fase de desarrollo de ese cohete, que es el booster del Starship. Martín, si llegaste a tiempo, porque el conteo está detenido, se detuvo, está en T-7, tuvieron tráfico de satélites. Creo que la estación espacial, la internacional, estaba, no había peligro, pero estaba un poco en el camino, entonces están esperando eso, que el range les dé el permiso para continuar el conteo. Estaba diciendo del tema de SpaceX, la nave que están desarrollando ahora, el Starship, una vez que la tengan, va a ser, sí, la más potente y más avanzada, no solo por la tecnología que tienen, sino por el tipo de motores. Va a ser, ellos tienen ya funcionando el primer motor de cohete de flujo continuo y de metanol. No hay cohetes todavía que funcionen con metanol. Usan hidrógeno, usan RP1, usan combustible sólido. Pero ellos son los primeros en lograr desarrollar un motor de flujo continuo. ¿Qué significa de flujo continuo? Bueno, es un motor que no solo aprovecha muchísimo los flujos de gases, pero que es muy difícil de hacer, requiere muchísima tecnología, pero les brinda la capacidad de utilizarlo, de reutilizarlo en unos 1000 despegues, algo que es ilógico, loco, ¿no? Además de eso, el metanol es un combustible que lo pueden sintetizar en Marte, con lo que hay en este momento en Marte y obviamente llevando tecnología, pero pueden utilizar recursos de Marte para sintetizar y crear ese combustible, entonces tendrían solucionado el regreso, el combustible de regreso en caso de tener una nave o mandar o colocar una base allí en Marte. Están mucho más allá de todo lo que pensamos.
The moon, so it's a much longer way to go there. So it's a very, very exciting space decade that's coming.
It's huge, isn't it? It's absolutely remarkable, and you guys are involved in it, and it is very exciting. Now, I think we're going to take a break. The countdown is on hold. As we've said, we have a launch window, so we're going to wait now and come off air just for a while and get a little bit more information, and we'll come back to you. In the meantime, do keep your eye on the website, arianespace.com, and we'll come back to you when we have more information. But for now, see you shortly.
Esta gente, digo, en este momento acaban de decir de que van a volver en cuanto tengan novedades, o sea que nos dejaron así colgados. Dice, miren en la web y se van a enterar de lo que sucede, o sea que me imagino, yo no veo, si esta es una imagen en tiempo real, no veo que estén ventilando oxígeno líquido de sus tanques, así que evidentemente ya tendrían una demora y no lo estaban diciendo. Lamentablemente, digo, bueno, vamos a tener que esperar eso. Vamos a dejar abierta un poco esta transmisión por si las dudas, pero creo que lo mejor va a ser, si en unos minutos no aparecen, vamos a hacer una nueva transmisión apenas lo tenga. Así que yo les recomiendo a todos que se suscriban y ahí pongan el botón de recibir notificaciones, porque seguramente vamos a cortar la transmisión y de esa manera están enterados apenas haya el lanzamiento. Quédense tranquilos que vamos a tratar de transmitirlo, ¿sí? Un abrazo grande.